So thank you very much, Medha, for coming to share your insights with us. Over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me, too. To you and the organizers who've been very hospitable, and I love being here. This is my first visit to Antwerp, and it's wonderful to be here. Thank you. So I'm going to start out by saying that you heard what Chris said about me. I mean, I'm not, like the speakers who came before, probably. I'm not in the health sciences, although I have worked in the bioinformatics domain a little bit. I'm being told to step away from the mic, so I will step away. I get loud, so please do tell me if I'm getting too loud. Right, so what I'm going to talk about today is really quite different from what went on before. I'm not going to talk so much about the technology itself, about semantic web itself, but more about the use cases in the agricultural domain. The raison d'etre, really, for what we're trying to do, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as CGIAR is concerned, for agri-semantics. So with that, let me first start out telling you a little bit about who we are, CGIAR. I don't know how many of you know who we are. Some of you I know do. But this started out as a consultative group on international agricultural research, therefore the acronym, although the acronym is really not used anymore. It's just called CGIAR, or the CGIAR system, which consists of 15 centers. And we work across domains, really. We're very interdisciplinary, working across the genetics, genomics, field agronomy, socioeconomics, breeding. The pipelines are all the way through from germplasm development on to releasing the germplasm, the new varieties, and testing them in the field. And for that, of course, we have to work with a lot of different partners. And typically, because we're working in developing countries, our partnerships and our networks are quite strong in developing countries and span the private as well as the public sector, as well as the civil society organizations. So it's just a little flavor of the kind of work that we do. I don't know how well you can see that. It's not the greatest slide. I apologize. But as you can see, these are our 15 centers, and if you sort of note where those orange dots are, you'll see that they're primarily in the developing countries. Those of you who are familiar with the climate vulnerability maps will also see that it's basically the swath of the centers is in the countries that are at highest risk of climate change. So that's another reality that we're grappling with very, very intimately. All of our research that I talked about is really focused around three primary thrust areas. Reducing rural poverty primarily, improving food security and nutritional security, and the third one is improving ecosystem services and natural resource management, ideally, while we're doing that. So as you can guess, that's not any easy, those aren't easy things to do. But those are the three primary sort of thrust areas, focus areas. And in order to do all of this, we align ourselves also with some of the key SDG goals, or SDGs, really. So that's a little bit about CGIAR. I've already alluded a little bit to some of this, but just to reinforce the environment that we're working in and the sort of the challenges a little bit that we face. So I did mention that we're multidisciplinary, spanning all the way, we do the field agronomy, the breeding, the germplasm development, socioeconomics, and increasingly stepping into the data science world, kicking and screaming for some of us, because this is not something that's our area of primary expertise for most of our researchers. We are multi-scale, so we operate all the way from the genetic through the landscape scale domain. We're working a lot increasingly with satellite imagery, drone imagery, unmanned aerial vehicles, et cetera. So that's a big challenge as well. And we, as I mentioned, we have a lot of partners. We try to be very consultative, so that imposes yet another. It's good in the long run. It is what we have to do, but it's not easy to do. And of course, these are highly heterogeneous, challenging environments. Climate challenged as well as challenged in the way of, in other ways as well, governance, infrastructure, political conditions, all of those things. So that's sort of the environment we work in, and that forms the backdrop for what we are trying to do with data. So it's important to keep that in mind. I wanted to throw that up there to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about here. When I say challenging and when I talk about heterogeneous, even within one country, this is Bangladesh, we're dealing with a lot of different challenges just in that one country, all the way from drought in the north to flooding in the south, issues of soil contamination with things like arsenic. Arsenic really is a big problem in Bangladesh for surface water particularly. And everything else in between. And then, of course, there's all throughout and almost everywhere we work, there's the issue of access to markets, both input and output markets, access to financial services, credit, insurance services, and we're trying to tackle those challenges as well. Right, so where does what we're talking about here fit into all of this? I was just presenting at Chatham House in London. That's where I was before I came here. And the topic that I was asked to talk on was artificial intelligence for sustainable and healthy food systems. And so that had me scratching my head a little bit because, where are we in this domain? And how do we leverage the technologies that are there? It's what we're trying to do. But how do we effectively do this? So I hope that by the end of this, you'll sort of be able to help us out a little bit, perhaps. This is the kind of question that I would face very regularly. This is a real question from one of my women farmers when I was in Nepal working. Chris mentioned that I was leading an initiative in Nepal to sustainable intensification of farming systems. You've shown me this wonderful technology, this drum seeder that I can plant my rice, in dry conditions really, and I don't have to transplant it. So tell me, what should I do this year? Should I use this drum seeder or should I transplant like I always do? How should I plant my rice? How should I manage it? What can you tell me about this? Well, we have weather data somewhere. We have management data somewhere. We have, yield potential data somewhere. We have, water data somewhere. It's all there, or much of it is there. But how was I able to, answer my farmer? Not effectively. I could take a guess. I could take sort of stabs in the dark and best guesses. But I should be able to do better than that, And so this is something that I feel very strongly about. These are real people whose livelihoods can be impacted in a better way. So how do we do that? So what we're envisioning is this sort of decision support and really risk mitigation is what we're talking about here, because farming is a risky business, particularly in developing countries, particularly with the challenges that I've talked about. So how do we mitigate that risk? There are all these other pieces, natural language and artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of that can be brought to bear, certainly for that. Those technologies exist. They may not all be completely mature, but they exist. And what we really need for them to work really is a sort of a knowledge base, these harmonized interoperable data sets, databases. And right now that's sort of the foundational piece that we're working on at CGIAR, that we're trying very hard to get to this point, to create that knowledge base for the sort of the technologies to work on. And that's not easy either, because that involves, the technologies are the easy piece. I keep saying that. The culture change is much harder. So we're, sort of attacking this from a multiplicity of different ways. I talked about risk mitigation, and this is a sort of a pilot project that we just funded. Through the big data platform. I'll talk about what the big data platform is in a little bit. But what we're talking about here is, it started out as evaluating how we might provide insurance to farmers to mitigate some of the risk that they undertake. So what that involves is first of all taking regular time-stamped pictures of the insured fields throughout the season. But more importantly, you see the crop profiles, soil data, weather data, satellite images. That's just some of the data streams that need to go into this. We're increasingly talking about delivering some advisories along with that, with the assessment of insurance. So, this is the difficult part, really. How do we do this effectively? Where do we go for this information, for reliable information that's locale specific? That's because in the world that we operate in, location is everything. So we need to be able to do that. And then, of course, you can use the images along with some of this other information to figure out, how to use this stuff, in claim settlements, really. So this is a small project. It's not really small, but it's a pilot project that's being undertaken now under the aegis of big data platform. and the work we do. For me, the real inspiration has been the biomedical field, because that's where, you know, they've done things, you know, really innovatively, really, it's a real inspiration. What has happened in the last 25 to 30 years, particularly with the NCBI resources and the functionalities that are available there to innovate. We're down now to about $99 to sequence the human genome. Might we envision a point at which we can envision something like this, where, you know, your farm comes to you, essentially your decisions come to you in a box? I think we're quite far from that, but I could imagine that we could get there. And I'd like to, you know, I'd love it. I'd love to see that getting there in the next, I don't know, 15, 20 years maybe? Maybe? I don't know. So here what we're talking about is, you know, things like managing soil fertility, trying to figure out other management scenarios as well, getting information about trusted input and output markets around you, near you, so some sort of complete package that a farmer might be able to use. And now, remember, we're talking largely in our world about farmers in developing countries. And this is difficult probably to implement effectively even in the global north. So trying to do this where we work is even that much more challenging. But I believe we can get there. I'm optimistic about this. It will take a lot of work, for sure. Right, so I've been referring to the big data platform. What is it? CGIAR has a portfolio, almost $1 billion portfolio, of about, I never remember the right number, it's probably about 16 CGIAR research programs. They're highly collaborative research programs, working across centers, working with a multiplicity of partners to leverage, you know, strengths effectively, really, that we don't have necessarily. And this platform is a very new entrant to that portfolio. And it's the big data platform, that's what we call it for short. I lead one of the 3 modules in that program, the sort of the heaviest, weightiest one, which is organize. It's trying to basically organize CGIAR's data, make it available, make it fair, really, with a focus on the interoperability, of course, as other people before me have said. And what we want to do is to enable that sort of aggregation and mining, really, of the big data pool, of the data pool, really. How are we going about this? In many different ways, but one of the first things that we've stood up is something called Guardian, which is, without the U, it's the Global Agricultural Research Data Innovation and what? Acceleration Network. So it's a mouthful, unfortunately. But what it's trying to do is, at least initially, it's focused on trying to sort of enable the discovery of all of CGIAR's resources. Typically, each CGIAR center has a publications repository and a data repository. Never the twain shall meet. I mean, they don't talk to each other, let alone talk to ones across. You know, God forbid that you should talk to another center. But anyway, that's the reality. And so what we've tried to do is just build this lightweight infrastructure to be able to expose the data and the publications, make them available to others who might want to explore those resources. Right now we have about 94,000 publications and about 2,700 data sets, and we'd like to see that growing. We're trying to encourage the growth of that. We don't have geospatial data. We're going to go after that pretty soon. By the end of this year, I'm hoping that we'll be including non-CGIAR repositories, at least a couple of them, so that you can expose, you know, you can look at that data along with other CGIAR data. And by sometime towards the middle of next year, hopefully, we'll be able to enable upload of data. So whether you're part of some, you know, whether you have a repository or not in your entity, in your institution, you would be able to come here and upload your publication or data into play in this sort of same sandbox, essentially. So what does this look like? I did a search. What did I do a search for? I did a search for nutrition here, which is a very cross-cutting topic. And what I see is, just off the top of the bat, I see about 4,400 publications and about 100 data sets, right? And I can filter those in multiple ways, and I can look at that stuff in different ways. When I actually look at the data sets, I can see that they're coming right now from many of our different centers. So that this is basically allowing you to somehow get to that needle in the haystack, really. I mean, you can certainly do a Google search, but you may not find much of our data very easily. You may have a hard time finding what it is that you need. And so this is a way of making that a lot simpler and showing you the sort of breadth. Now, when I click on any one of those data sets, this is a data set that's available from the International Center for Tropical Agriculture, which is one of the leads for the big data platform. Actually, it's co-led by IFPRI, which is the International Food Policy Research Institute, with which I'm affiliated, and with CIAT, which is the admin lead for this. So the first thing you see at the top of the page is, of course, the title of the data. You see the authors, and those recently have been linked so that when you click on any one of these, you can find other resources that person is responsible for in Guardian. You immediately see the license, which we encourage the use of CC licenses where they're relevant and possible. And so this one is the least restrictive, which is great. So it tells you immediately what you can do with that resource. That's the idea behind it. If I go further down, but before I go further down in the record, what you see here is a link, a DOI, to the actual resource itself. So the key thing to note here is that at this point, Guardian doesn't hold the resources itself. It's just enabling the discovery of those resources. It's pointing to them. So that's something important to note. That won't be true necessarily sometime next year when we have this upload functionality up and working. Right, so then you go further down in the page and you see something about the geographic context for that data or publication, data set or publication, if it exists. You see a little bit of a summary of the thing, if that has been uploaded into the repository. And you see this nice graphic on how fair is this thing, how fair is this resource. And now our centers are trying to do better, they're trying to ramp up that fair score, particularly for the interoperability piece, which they tend to have more difficulty with. And then there's keywords that are now coming from ontologies and from agronomic. So that's a sort of another way of filtering. We're playing with these things. It's quite new yet. We're playing with how we can manage this better. What can we deliver to our users? What are they looking for that we can do better? So those are the keywords. Going further down, for the resources that have the least restrictive licenses, so the ones that are available to you, CC BY, CC 0. You can actually get the data with one click rather than having to go to the DOI, sign off on some accept thing that the center's repository will ask you for, and then click again to get to the data, et cetera. You can get that this way. And what we're moving towards is enabling a batch download. So for those data scientists who want to crunch a bunch of data sets, we want to be able to make that easier. But we can only do that when the licenses kind of allow that pretty seamlessly, that we're not at liability or risk. And then what we're doing here that's quite neat also is linking, using algorithms to look across the data sets and publications that are in Guardian and linking the relevant other piece. So when I'm here I'm at a data set, I'm looking at relevant publications from across Guardian. And if I were at a publication, I would be looking at relevant data sets, of course. So that's what this piece of it looks like. And that's already starting to use semantics, and we'll continue to, we'll be enriching that piece as we go forward with development in the next year. What's also neat is the map view sort of capabilities. So here I did another search. This is for rice and weed, just in this case, it's just rice that I'm looking at. And what I see is I can choose a number of different parameters here. I can choose, in this case, I'm looking at rain-fed yield of rice globally. And I can this is spatial information essentially from 2005. So it's a little bit outdated. We're trying to update this now for 2010 data, but we're always quite behind the curve because this is a huge amount of work that goes into generating this. What we'd like to do is once we have enough data sets semantically enriched, be able to do this on the fly. We're not there yet, but we want to do this. So what you see is I drop my pin from the panel there on India. and I get a quick view of that for that selected polygon, for that selected area, which in this case is India. I see that the mean yield is about a ton and a half, a little over a ton and a half per hectare of rice. And it gives me a minimum and a maximum as well for the entire country, which is really nice. I mean, it's a nice quick view of what this was, at least in 2005, and hopefully we'll catch up as we move on. But what I can also do, what's pretty neat, is now I can take my little polygon drawer, which is a little pentagonal shape there, and draw a polygon on the map and say, actually, I'm interested in zooming in on the areas that are very low yield or very high yield based on the color of the maps. And here I can see that in this central area, Madhya Pradesh or so, the mean here is quite low. It's under a ton per hectare there. And then when I move over to sort of a higher yield area closer to the delta of the Ganga, the biggest river in India, the mean goes up to almost 3 tons per hectare. So it's kind of a nice, way of quickly exploring the data and trying to get a sense of what that's telling you. Again, once we start, getting more semantically enriched data sets through the work that the organized module is doing, we hope to be able to enable this much more dynamically, much more on the fly. But what I want to talk to you about that's really very cool is this sort of exploring the data. This is actually using semantic technologies. So here I can sort of explore the data pool, and I can say, all right, give me, and you won't find this very easily in Guardian. It's kind of hidden. It's a hidden demo within the demo, and I can talk to you more about it later if you're interested. But I can say, okay, give me yields of unimproved, whatever, one of these crops, which is what we have right now. This is sorghum in Africa. And so when I click on Africa, I see, you can't see it very well, but this is, and we have to improve the color schemes on that. But we have a map of Africa, and it shows me the countries in which, for which I have data sets. So then I can choose all 3 of those. And I click on the give me the data, and it actually dives into the data. It finds the yields. It finds the right piece of data that you want, and it visualizes it for you. It gives you a quick visualization of that. So it's a great data exploration tool. And it's how we envision using semantic web going forward to explore data. This is not an analysis. It's just a beginning exploration of the data. So you can then tease it apart. But you could imagine that if you were a funder or a policymaker and you wanted to have a quick view of what things were like, you might find this tool quite useful. If I go further down in that page, I see the data, not the data set itself, but the data that was being mined to give you that information. And you see the data sets. In this case, 3 data sets from Tanzania, Mali, and Ghana for the thing that I showed you. So in very quickly, you're able to explore data without spending a hell of a lot of time, massaging the data, trying to figure out what column headings mean, et cetera, which is a very common problem that we deal with. So this is very powerful, and this is something that we want to explore more. I should say that this is household survey data, which is why you saw those error bars were off the scales. It's not controlled trial data by any means. It's what farmers are reporting. So there's a lot of variation there. Right. So I want to show you a couple more examples. The first one is, all right. So what do maize yields look like in Africa, both under sort of recommended fertilizer conditions and whatever that might mean? I mean, you have to really start digging into the data to analyze it as a researcher. This is a quick exploration of the data. I want to stress that, and it's powerful, but it should not be used as a sort of a end all and be all. So what does it look like under sort of complete fertilization versus no fertilization? This is what I've done is chosen Mali out of the map of Africa there because it tells me where I have data. And then I look at that, and again, it's digging into the data set, visualizing, giving me a quick visualization of what that looks like, and you can see quite a big difference there, even though the error bars are also quite big. And you start seeing, it's the same sort of visualization where you can get the data. You can also actually probably, through the Sparkle thing there, you can look at the Sparkle query and use that Sparkle query further if you'd like. And then it gives you the data set always. to go in and to look at the nuances of that data in a deeper way. You can also look at something like this. Give me average maize yields for these 5 countries under conservation ag and conventional ag, for instance. And it does the same thing. It'll go in and it'll visualize it for you and give you a quick view that seems to say to me that, yeah, actually conservation ag seems to have a positive effect, except in one country, except in Ethiopia. So I might want to sort of tease apart, what's causing that a little bit more. So in terms of teasing that apart, what's coming next is we're trying to find ways of enabling, people aren't going to know how to write Sparkle. I don't know Sparkle. Most of our researchers have no clue what ontologies are or what semantic web is, nor should they. I mean, this is not something that we want to bother our users with. We want to be able to do that work and give them intelligent ways to interact with that data pool, where they don't have to know anything other than their own domain, really. That's the idea. So otherwise we lose them. I mean, we're not going to succeed otherwise. So what we're trying to do is make this easy, and we're just playing with ways to do that. So that same example that I showed you for conventional practice and conservation agriculture, we're trying to figure out how can we enable users to filter what they want and get at what they want. But we have to have an entry point. So I have to be able to say, okay, I'm interested in this in a larger sense, and then keep digging deeper. So there are still many unanswered questions on this, but we're trying to tackle it and figure out how we might do this. And so then I can search and then filter the data that's existing, that's semantically described, that's in the InGuardian. And then I can try to see, okay, what exists across, what are the categories that I can query across all of the plots, and what is, where are the gaps, what are the sorts of things that I can ask, and what are the things that I'm going to, miss some plots, essentially, in this data set or in these data sets that exist in Guardian. And so we envision a sort of an interface that looks something like this. This may change, but the idea is there that you should be able to enable the user to very quickly choose what it is they're looking for based on their domain expertise. They should understand what this is and just sort of point and click and get what they want, because without that, we lose them. So this is the sort of functionality we're aiming for. We're not there yet. This is data that again, there are a few data sets that we've cleaned up, that we've added semantic meaning to, and that's why we can do these sorts of demos, to test, to show the value proposition, and to try and get buy-in, really, for what we're trying to do. Most data sets don't even look this good. So this is the data set that I showed you with the conservation ag and the conventional ag. It's a large data set, 5 countries, some 8,000 rows of data, which I know that by biomedical standards is piddly, but it's large for us, large enough to do what we're trying to do. And so this is actually a very well-curated data set in our world. So there's a metadata tab. It tells you something about what we're doing. It aligns to our CG core metadata schema, which is based on Dublin core, that operates across all of our repositories. That's something that we've done through the Big Data Platform and the Open Access and Open Data Initiative. And then it has, you can't see the tabs at the bottom, but it has variables which are described here, which are very well described for your normal agronomic data set. It doesn't look like this. But when you actually start looking, this is the on-farm data. This is the next tab. So there's metadata, variables, on-farm data, on-station data. When I start looking at that, I start seeing all sorts of discrepancies here. So when I look at the data set, I see sort of these 2 empty columns. I go further down, those columns are still empty, but now the nomenclature has changed, essentially. Happens all the time. I'm sure you're very, very familiar. I see a lot of nodding heads, so you're familiar with this problem. And as I say, this is a very good data set. You go further down even, again, those columns are there. Now again, the way of calling things has changed. Because we typically have multiple data collectors, and certain things make sense to the individual, they use what makes sense to them. And then sometimes putting it all together can be a huge exercise in frustration, really. So we go further down. Now you see that those 2 columns are now all of a sudden populated, you know? So it's a highly variable data set. Again, there's issues with nomenclature. Those two columns that were empty have started to be populated. I can refer back to the sheet on variables to try and make sense of this. And as an agronomist, I can actually take a pretty educated guess at what this is. But it's still not exactly lending itself to, you know, where a machine can go in and do anything useful with it. And so on. It continues on. And then the language changes as well. So now, you know, from English, we've changed to Portuguese. So this, you know, these are real problems. This is a real data set. And it's, as I stress, it's a very good data set. Right, so what are we doing to tackle this? We have sort of a line that's drawn. For historical data, we're trying to encourage people to use semantic standards and re-annotate data sets that have already been uploaded. And we're trying to, through the big data platform, give them a little funding to do this. But as you can imagine, it's still very difficult. We don't have the tools to enable that kind of smart annotation very easily. There are all kinds of issues here, and I hope you'll hear more about those in the agri-semantics panel that's coming up at the end of the day. You'll see me again there too, unfortunately. But what we're trying to do is we have this Agra Films, which is the Agronomy Field Information Management System, which is a fieldbook generator that's based on ontologies and control vocabulary, really ontologies. So it's based on agrovoc. No, it's based on agro and other ontologies in our domain, as well as out of our domain, like environmental ontology, unit ontology, crop ontologies, of course. So we're trying to use what's out there rather than replicating, you know, making some bespoke thing that again, replicates stuff. What are the advantages of this? Well, first of all, you're standardizing the data collection from the start rather than trying to address this right at the very end of the data lifecycle, which is once it's been uploaded into the repository, trying to go back and do something with it to enrich the semantics. Here, we're generating data that's already RDFized, essentially, so that's fantastic. There's built-in, so what's the value propositions here for the user, for the researcher who we're asking to use this thing? There's built-in metadata, and it certainly maps to CGIAR repositories. It could map to other repositories as well as other people start to use it, and we have more use cases for that. So it's very easy with a one click to upload the data set that's once the data's been collected and re-uploaded. There's built-in R scripts. This is based on R. So there's built-in R scripts for statistical analysis and spits out some really magnificent statistical reports based on the design that you choose as you're setting up your fieldbook generator. So it's quite nice that way. And of course, then you're enabling data integration easily. You're enabling that sort of plug and play that I just showed you with Guardian. And the other thing that we're doing is that we're making sure that this is available for people to download paper field books, because we work in developing countries where this is going to be important, it's going to stay important. But we're also trying to push digital data collection. And we're working with a company in Australia called Katie Dart. Our breeders are working with the same company, and they have a very, very nice user-friendly product. So that'll use agrofilms. The agrofilms will be basically tied to that, so that you can go out there and collect data. You can look at things as they're happening dynamically, because there are heat maps that are really nice. So that's all happening. We've user tested in September. It's going to be field tested in the spring. If you're interested, come talk to me. This is not just for CGIAR by any means. We're working with Rothamsted. We're working with the University of Florida, University of California, Davis, and many of our CGIAR centers as well for this. What it spits out is something that looks like this. I know you can't see it in the back, but it's basically a data collection sheet, a data collection protocol that with the column headings already standardized, and things that are understandable to the researchers and the data collectors, which is very important. So what does this look like? How much time do I have? Okay. I don't know if I want to go through this really in detail, but basically what I'm trying to show you is sort of the RDFized version of, what does this RDF, what might it look like? It's an exercise in it's not elementary, because what we're trying to do is basically build up these relationships and make sure that we have all of the terms that are needed to build up the graph for what we're trying to describe. So I'm going to just sort of tell you that, this is, I went through that in a blink of an eye. But ideally, what we'd also like to do, of course, is connect that to weather data that's sitting out there for this administrative area in Ethiopia, in this case, the Oromia province, I think. So, just this is not that elementary. But the thing I want to talk about is, so far we've talked about data, we've talked about resources themselves. Where do the people fit in? So we've got another project, Vivo, for CGIAR. We're moving ahead with this very, very early on right now. The idea is to link in Guardian. When you see a person's name, you should be able to link to their whole profile, to know what they do, where they work, all of that stuff. And Vivo does that. And so we're trying to implement this as a sort of a find an expert capability across CGIAR that will also tie in to Guardian to really create a web of services there. So I did a search here for conservation ag, and I see organizations in the earlier screen. I see people, organizations, locations, and sort of something about the grants and the research areas. It's very, very dirty right now, very early in this. By next year, hopefully we hope to stand something up that's cleaner. But you can already see a little bit of this. So you can click on a person's name, you'll see the geographic areas they work in. You'll see some of the resources attached to them. So we're starting on that. Right, so the idea here is we're investing in the semantic web and RDF, right? This is a schema that I took from a presentation that Tim Berners-Lee made in 2006. So it's quite old now, but I think it still holds true. I mean, what we're trying to do is connect all of the pieces, aggregate the data sets, include the visualization, leverage semantic web in a multiplicity of different ways for this. Right, so that's if you didn't catch that, I don't know, I don't see very many smiles, but that's from a Simon and Garfunkel song. Yes, good, I see some, I couldn't help it. It says get on the RDF bus, and that's the thing that popped into my head. It was very late last night. Right, so going back to where I started. Artificial intelligence, how do we leverage that for healthy and sustainable food systems? Can we do that? This is again from Berners-Lee, from the same talk. I thought it was interesting. Of course, semantic web is not artificial intelligence or vice versa. But what we hope is that artificial intelligence can use semantic web as a sort of the interoperability glue. That's what we need, in my view, to enable some of these neat technologies and to be able to answer the kinds of questions that I'm hoping we can answer. So I throw this out at you. This is my last slide. I wanted to end with some questions so that you can go away and sort of think about it. And if you have answers, please come talk to me. So, how can AI and machine learning, how do we bring these things together effectively to be able to help that farmer, in the end, the ultimate beneficiary ideally, mitigate some of the risk in the heterogeneous environment in which she works? So this is, for me, the driving question. We're very far from actually talking directly with all of these technologies to the farmer. I know that. I'm not naive about that. But can we do this? And, ultimately, can we aim towards that? Or is it just a sort of pie in the sky? For me, and for a lot of us, actually, what role do research organizations and research data play in all of this? How do we do this effectively? How do we harness this, given that our expertise is quite far from these sorts of things? Can we use biomedical sciences as an exemplar? I always do, but it's a little bit sleight of hand because it's not easy to do. And lastly, I want to just end with this. This is from a paper or a report on futures, farming futures in Africa or something like that. And what you see that there's China in the red, plumping along at the top. And this goes from essentially 2006 or so to 2050. And the prediction is that at some point, Africa's agricultural production will actually rise at the highest sort of level. compared to many of the other countries. So that's what we're predicting. And this is not just one-off. There are other papers that have sort of said similar things. So given this environment, how can some of the what we call the disruptive technologies address some of the key limitations, particularly in Africa? So Africa, the poor soil fertility is a very key limitation. If we can overcome that, and overcome the issue of access to markets, to credit, to financial institutions really of different sorts, whether it's insurance or microcredit or bigger credit, we can address a lot of the problems that are currently existing. So I want to leave you with those questions, and thank you very much for your attention. I enjoyed this.
Thank you, Medha, for a very illuminating talk on the needs in agriculture for integration and interoperability. Do we have any questions from the audience? Scott, in front of you.
Can't see you. How have you found the coverage for ontologies for the areas that you're looking at? Because obviously it's less, for health, for healthcare it's better. There's much better coverage already.
Yeah, so one of our centers, Bioversity International, has been spearheading that work, particularly for the crop ontologies. So it started with the crop ontologies, and Marie-Angélique is sitting 2 rows behind you. So you might want to have a big powwow with her, because she's one of the key folks who's involved in that. That effort has been led by Elisabeth Arnaud at Bioversity for some time. But we do have the crop ontologies for about 30-some crops, I believe, all the mandate crops of the CGIAR, certainly. And now we have the agronomy ontology, which is what's powering, Agra Films. And we're trying to think about a socioeconomic ontology. The worry that I have is, again, are we creating all these silos? And how do we sort of make sure that we have something that is really usable? I don't want more silos that I have to then figure out how to do. We're already facing this problem about mapping across ontologies. So there are many ontologies. There are many that are missing. Livestock is poor. Fisheries is poor. So we're trying to plug those gaps. In the next year, we expect to have at least a draft socioeconomic ontology, the beginnings of a livestock ontology, and possibly some very, very early stuff on fish. So we're tackling our own world first, and then broadening, but we hope that it'll be more widely usable, certainly out there for everybody to use. The agronomy ontology is on GitHub right now. Crop ontology is readily available as well, so.
Okay. There's one more question at the back. Dean, just before we take the question, some minor rearrangements with the rest of the talks in the session. The next speaker is actually be Tom Baker. So Tom, maybe you could set up while Medha takes the last question. Medha, do you want to take the question on this?
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to take this off?
Yes, that would be good. Thank you.
So, Dean, do you want to come at us with your question?
Yeah, so you made an allusion in your talk to scale and size of data. Seems to me that in agriculture, when you really get going, you're going to have streaming data, you're going to have image data, you're going to have longitudinal data. Well, we're talking about some serious scale. What sort of plans do you see either in the CG or in general for coping with that?
It's a good question. I mean, what we've tried to do, I forgot to mention this, but the big data platform doesn't focus on the genomics and genetics part of what we do, because we see those communities as being already pretty well served. What we're focusing on is agronomy and socioeconomics primarily, because those are really underserved. And so our effort to tackle this initially has been, okay, can we just put our arms around field agronomy and the socioeconomics that goes along with that? And so that's where the efforts on ontologies are focused.
But that's going to include things like satellite data eventually.
No, it will,
Yeah.
and we're struggling with that.
I'm looking far ahead, yeah.
Right. No, but that's the kind of high throughput phenotyping stuff we're hoping. We know of other efforts that are happening in that domain, so we're kind of trying to tackle what we see as the holes and wait, if necessary, for the stuff that's happening elsewhere that we can just use.
That's a good plan, because then you can get some value without having to face the
Yep.
scale thing. And then when you get to that point, maybe some other folks, like weather folks, are already tackling it, of course.
Yep,
So,
yep.
okay, thank you.
We're already dealing with high throughput phenotyping at many of our centers. So they have already the big gantries and the big systems in place for that. And so there are, and I know there's work ongoing. I'm aware of work in the US as well as in France. I know there are other places where this is happening. So ideally, we would be able to bring those pieces together. The image analysis is going to be a huge thing. For geospatial data, it's going to be, the world's your oyster. I don't know if you want to do that, Dean, but it's something for you. Good. Thank you very much.